to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and tie master Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. You know, Anne-Marie, as we were getting started here, it occurred to me, we actually don't really have a lot of fiction here on the show. Well, as far as I know, I mean, we have guests who have told us all kinds of things. We never really know 100% for sure whether it's fiction, but we kind of presume most of the time that they're telling us what actually happened in their lives and what their career paths have been all about and the lessons that they're sharing and so forth. But we haven't had, I think we've had maybe 2 or 3 guests over the years who have talked about creations, fictional creations of their own. And we get one of those today. And I like that because we're all about storytelling, right? We love storytelling around here.
Yeah, and we do. We get a lot of life stories, and I would presume some of that's going to come out in this book. But yeah, a good fiction story.
Yeah, well, when you write a book, because I've been through that, and I think you've been through some writing too, you tell from your own experience. So even if you're telling a fictional story, some of it has to come from your own experience because that's what you know. That's where you got all your information from. So I'm sure that's going to come out too. But well, let's find out some more. This is going to be interesting. So our guest today is Robert Crothers. He is the author of a very recently released book called Entangled Hearts, A Forbidden Journey of Love. And we're going to learn a little bit about not just the book, but about the author in just a moment. So Robert, first of all, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I want to thank you for having me today.
We're glad to have you here. Now, what we normally do whenever we have any kind of guest on is we want to get a little bit of a biography to find out, how they got to be doing what they're doing here. And just from what you told us before we got started here in the green room, you kind of came from a rather unusual path to a creative endeavor like writing a fictional novel. So tell us a little bit about that path.
Well, the path is, first of all, it started with the military. Of course, then as I was growing up, I always thought it would just be the military, but it didn't. But we did our obligation as we had to back in the 60s, and I just stayed. I enjoyed the military life.
Mm-hmm.
I did eight years of active duty, and then I changed it and went into the Air Force Reserves and finished my career there. But along the way, I decided I was going into engineering after that. And I did. I went into engineering, and I had some fabulous jobs while being an engineer. My specialist was process engineering.
Okay.
I developed all the work orders, the instructions, how to build something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And worked on many things. I worked on the space shuttle for 4 years, writing the work instructions on how to put together all the communication gear for the space shuttle program.
Right. Okay.
That was one of the first ones I landed. Others I got into very early with a company named Foxborough Corporation, which built a lot of computers for the gas industry.
Mm-hmm.
I also worked in the automotive industry for Delco Electronics, built all the HVAC controls that went inside the automobiles. Once again, all the instructions on how the work is to put that thing together. So, and nothing for the consumer who bought the car. That was they're on their own. So
yeah, right. There were other divisions to take care of that part of it.
That's correct.
But interesting, to my perspective anyway, interesting that you went into what is largely a left brain path, a very logical, linear kind of path. And then at some point later on in life, you switched to the right brain, which is not something most people do, although it is something that is more and more common. It's also not all that uncommon in my family. My brother, speaking of NASA, my brother works for NASA currently as a software engineer. So I have a little bit of similarity there. He's working on the Falcon Heavy project, but no, not the Falcon Heavy, the other one, the Artemis project going to the moon. But the challenge that's involved for somebody who is left brain switching over to right brain is something that anyone who's ever tried to do it knows how challenging it is. It's difficult because they are 2 different ways of thinking about the world, understanding the world, perceiving the world. And then trying to turn that into something where you're communicating to somebody else is an even bigger challenge. It's one that I appreciate. I'm one of the few in life who have been able to kind of reach to both hemispheres. I have been down the left hemisphere side. I've also been down the right hemisphere side. I've been able to kind of marry the two together. But it's not something most people can do. So I guess my first question is, did you find that a challenge, or was that relatively easy for you?
Well, it was a challenge because I started writing just like I did when I was writing processes.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of things missing in my stories, and I had some great educators along the way, mainly copy editors, who read my work and then would write back to me 6 pages long of, oh, you know what this is missing? Everything. So
everything.
So I've had some great copy editors who helped me along the way, and of course, the internet is a great tool for learning as well. I just enjoyed it, but I did tell a lot of stories while in the military as well. You know, people enjoyed my growing up. Let's say, for instance, where I came from, what we did. They were enthused by, you know, you had that there. Oh, you had this. You know, I thought we all had the same thing, but I found out we didn't, and it was interesting.
That's an eye opener when we get older to find out that other people didn't grow up the way we did.
It was, and from different parts of the country, throughout the United States and overseas as well. You know, I learned a lot. I know when I went to Germany, and I was talking to this woman there who grew up in Poland when it was on the communism side. And then when it broke loose, I said, well, how did you learn English? And she would tell me the story of how they used to go in the basement and learn to speak English at night with the rest of the kids and stuff. And I thought that was, well, isn't that fascinating? You should be writing something about that. I don't know, because I love to read that. And as time went on, I finally decided that after I retired, I had to do something. I wasn't going to go back into engineering. So I played around with writing. I thought, what better way to start than one of my own stories? And that's where I ended up, going down that road there.
Well, that starts to answer the next question I had. Was it was about the content of the novel, because the novel, as I understand it, is about young love. It's about a romance taking place for somebody who's kind of in a coming of age place in their life. So it sounds like you kind of drew that a little bit from your own experience, and which is that's experiences where you're going to get the most detail. You're going to be able to tell the most three-dimensional story. It's going to have the most action going on, which of course copy editors love. They want action. They don't want still scenes that don't really go anywhere and don't move anywhere. And they want detail. They want you to paint with as detailed a brush as you can. So of course you're going to draw from your own experience in order to do that.
Wow.
Even saying that, though, it's not easy, especially if you've always had that logical, linear way of thinking about things, right? Anne-Marie, I mean, you know what it's like. You've done writing. You know how challenging it can be to start, you know, not ferreting, but like teasing out a storyline from a linear perspective.
Right.
Yeah, it could be quite difficult to start the process. But Robert, I'm keen to think, once you started, did it flow?
It did flow. After about the 10th or 11th time, it started to get better.
We didn't say that it couldn't start as a trickle.
No, it's true. It didn't start as a trickle. You know, those four or five words in a sentence, and then you have to expound here a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was a 4-year learning process. So once I retired, I thought I had something, and I thought, well, gee, who's going to buy a book of 30 pages? And what does it really say in 30 pages? Really, it was more of a process than it was a story.
Right.
And so I had to sit down, and some of the odd times of the day, like 2:00 in the morning, something would strike me, and I'd have to get up, head to the computer, and start writing it in. And didn't care what it looked like, just get it down, and go back in and then sort through it and see what you can make out of it. So there was a lot of that going on for a few years. And then, of course, I'm my own worst enemy, because I'd read it And I say, I don't like that. I got to change that. So as my friend said, you really like shooting yourself in the foot, don't you? And I said, yeah, I do. So, but I wanted something that was, going to be read by millions. How's that? We'll go out to the millions
So
category.
you were aiming big.
Yeah, I'm aiming for the moon.
All right. Hey,
But
if you're going to aim for something, why not?
well, that, and I wanted to make it, something that I can leave as a legacy for my family.
Nice.
I want them to know something about me because I did some research in genealogy, and there was a lot of unanswered questions in genealogy. Why did they do that?
Oh, sure.
So I didn't want to leave that. I want my family to know where I was coming from, what I did as a kid. Because my mother always said, you were the easiest child to raise because you were never home.
I don't know, Anne-Marie, is that actually a good thing? I would think that would also be a nerve-wracking thing. You're a mom. You tell me.
I think the times have changed. I think
okay.
nowadays, yes, but I know when I was a kid, I was out all the time, and it's wonderful. So,
yeah, there's only two things I had to learn as a child growing up. One is I had to hear my mother call us for dinner, and two, I had to watch for the flickering light on the porch.
Yeah, that's right.
So I had both of those down. I knew exactly when the light was going to flicker, so I'd get on my bike and head back home.
So for anyone under 30 who wondered how you would communicate with your kids if you didn't have cell phones, there's your answer. you would do it with the back porch light or the front porch, depending.
Or a little help from the neighbors too. If mom was yelling, so wasn't one of the neighbors. So,
right. Yep.
One of us could hear somebody. Well, gee, they're calling Teddy. I guess my mother's calling me too. So there I go.
Hey, your mom's calling you.
Yeah. That was our communication line. The neighbor, your mom's calling you. Okay. So, but anyways, it boiled down to I wanted to leave a legacy, and the best way I could do it is in a book. So the book turned into a family thing when it was first developed, and then I said, you know what? I've never had a book published. So let me write something that I would be proud to publish now.
Okay.
And I expounded on that by making it, well, let's make this readable. And come to find out, and from the people that have read the book, a lot of them are coming back telling me, gee, I had an experience like that. Or that's like, I remembered those days. So it was a compliment to me. Well, you remember those days? I remember those same places you just talked about. And things like that. So the book matured with me as in the writing. So it was great.
That is good. That's really good. Now you have developed a certain skill level, obviously, because of the response that you've gotten from your readers. You've gotten a skill level developed that gives you a level of expertise. So given your current level of expertise, what do you think is the key to successful storytelling?
I think it's a lot of it is imagination in your head. How did you see that piece, that element that I was talking about? For instance, I had to pick a start. It was a love story, but I couldn't just jump right into it. So I wanted to build something up. I wanted the reader to know that, look, I was no genius in school. I was one of those guys that was just lucky to get to the next grade. If there was a graduation going on, they put 10 people in front of me just to get me out. So
just to get you out. Oh my goodness.
But so I started there, and I started there, things started to progress and say, well, the next thing that happened was this, and it tied into that story. And then the next one tied into that story. So all through the book, when you go through it, you're going to tie into a story that ties into another story that ties into that story all the way through. And I always enjoyed that when I would listen to other people talk about their life, how they tied that into something. And not knowing that I was going to end up doing that someday, it just stuck in my head. And then as I sat down and those 2:00 in the morning brain attacks came, I just say, oh yeah, I remember this now. And then I type that in, and it just kept building and building from there.
Right. Well, and it makes sense because, like you say, good storytelling really is a tapestry. It's not a single storyline. It's a collection of storylines that weave together and intertwine. And you leave this story and you come over to that story, and then you come back to this one, and then there's a third one. And the storyline is weaving all over the place. Because a good story is never a straight line.
No.
Ever.
No. This story isn't. But there, it went to a point, and where I had a change then. We get to a point in the story where it's going to jump a 4-year period, a short break in the romance department, and then we come back in, and then it starts all over again at that point in time. How did you get back together? How did you do this and everything? It just kept going. I finally had to come to an end. So otherwise it'd be a novel, not a book, a storybook. So, but
it qualifies as a novel. It's fictional. It's a book. Doesn't that make it a novel?
Well, from this point of thinking, I'm always thinking when I see the word novel, I'm thinking those 400 or 500 pages that you have to read, and this one is not that long. I mean, it's 240 pages or 42 pages long, but it's not bad going from 30 to 242. So I think it
absolutely. Well, yeah. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. It doesn't have to be Gone with the Wind.
No, and truly it's not.
So Robert, can you tell us a bit about the story? I'm dying to hear it because I don't know anything about it.
Well, the story is a fixed, true stories based on true stories with some fiction in it. But it starts with me going from 6th grade into junior high. I tell you how I got there. I tell you how one of the teachers saved my life from going backwards. You go forwards. And he brought in a lot of good things to me in 7th grade. I also talk about the time that I was probably headed down the wrong road of life with one of the gangs and things of that nature, and how I got out of it. So we talk about that. I talk about getting the job at the same store that I was caught doing things I shouldn't have been doing in there. And so I was lucky there. And it was at that store is where that girl came into my life at that point in time. And I talk about that. That's where the love affair starts there at 16. So from there, I write about all the things that happened to us, the good, the bad, the ugly, all that. And then I get to the break. From there, when I went into the military, that was the end of the story at that point in time. 4 years later, we picked it right up again after I got back from my second tour out of Vietnam. So we got together and found out that we thought we had a love affair of each other. So it picks up there and it goes forward to what happened from that point to the point of Off and On, where she left and then we're going to get back together again, and she left and then we're going to get back together again. So it's one of those stories, it just, that's why, it was a journey of forbidden love. We have a love for each other, but somehow or other, it's just not getting there. And that's what we wrote about. And now it talks about the adventures we went through. One of the things it does talk about, it tells, where did you fall in love? How did you know you were in love? And we talk about that. And it was during the Christmas season in South Carver, Massachusetts, on a train. And we wrote about how we fell in love on a train ride around cranberry bogs. So it was an interesting time. I think it's a real good story, by the way. Of course, I would, but then again,
you're not biased, not at all.
Not at all. No, I'm trying to even get it out there in the world of saying, this would make a great one of those holiday winter movies, guys.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So
That's exactly what I was thinking. You put Christmas in it, you've got
Yeah.
a multi-million-pound story there.
Well,
But I love a will they, won't they kind of story.
yeah, and we do, and of course we grew up near the beach, which is another fantastic place to have a love affair. The ocean, the tide, the
You're right
sitting
on the
on,
coast.
yeah, it's just great. I talk about the sand dunes that we had to climb, and to make our way, the little things that we did as kids, our travels, even talk about places that are no longer in business because times have changed.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's a wonderful life. That'd be a great movie too, wouldn't it? A Wonderful Life.
I think that's the title's taken, but other than that, yeah.
Oh, well, wouldn't you know it? Somebody beat me to it.
Somebody beat you to it. Yeah. Well, Jimmy Stewart was, he was a smart guy, but yeah. Well, in Abington, Massachusetts, where you grew up, where the story is set, it is a beautiful little town south of Boston, not all that far from the Cape, actually.
No.
If you go to Cape Cod, you drive past that area.
Yes, yeah. We're halfway. I always
You're halfway, yeah.
Yeah. People would say, "Well, where do you live?" I said, "About 20 miles south of Boston, 20 miles north of the Cape."
Right.
So,
but the main thing on the coast, when you're on the coast, you're pretty close to the coast, I would imagine. You have the dunes right there. When you live on the coast, that has a different effect on growing up than it does for somebody who grows up inland, whether it be somebody who grows up on a farm in the Midwest, or like I did in upstate New York, or wherever it might be. When you grow up on water has it adds interesting texture to any kind of storyline because of all of the imagery and the ideas and preconceptions and so forth we have about water and about oceans and the role that it can play in any kind of a story. So you have a natural backdrop, I guess is what I'm saying, to your story there, just to have the ocean there, and that was just part of your experience. But you probably never thought about it that way. It's just something that comes out to somebody else who's never grown up that way.
Never thought, the water was our playground and just part of our life,
Mhm.
And, some people took to it and some people didn't,
Yeah.
Plus I have to say, on the coastline, we had a lot of amusement parks as well. So we had a plethora of all places to go as teenagers.
Mm.
If I went towards Boston, there was an amusement park. I went towards the Cape, there was another amusement park.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that we all loved too there was we were pretty big in camping. So we had a great state park that we could go camping to, and we had a lot of kids that were campers back then.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was a lot of us sitting on the lake shore. And we looked just like the Hollywood films, guitars, pit fires, everybody trying to be somebody out there on the lake shore,
Right.
sing-alongs and whatnot. You just imagine 16-year-olds, trying to be adults. So, but we had some things, and it was great, and it was a great life, and I wanted to share it with those, others that could see, oh, look, that was pretty interesting back then. But it seems to be pretty interesting to everybody that lived back there. So, that's the good part.
That is good. Yeah. So now the other thing I wanted to ask you about, since you're now an experienced storyteller, is have you experimented at all with just making up stories, like on the spot? Like this, do the grandkids or does some family member ever say, "Tell us a story," and you just kind of wing out a story that you just kind of invented out of thin air? Have you gotten to that point yet, or are you still working with, well, this is what my experience was, so I'm going to tell you that story?
I tell stories whether they like it or not.
Oh, okay.
I just the other day I was sitting with some classmates of mine, and we sit there and we don't realize that 55 years have gone by, and somebody's sitting there and I said, I remember when, and then all of a sudden the story would come out about you and I when we went to this place and that place, and we went to the bar to get the pizza. And then people are looking at us like, bar? Well, yeah, we didn't have pizza places like Domino's and things like that. You had to go to the bar to get the bar pizza, and they had a section over there that you could be under 21 to get it. So it was a place to go, and that's what we did. We, either that or you're at Howard Johnson's, and you can only go there so many times.
There's a throwback. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I do. If something strikes me, I tell them. I tell my nieces and nephews all kinds of things. Well, here's something I did when, like you, and so on and so forth. So, but no, they don't have to come up and ask me anything. I'm
You're
here.
volunteering it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready. We go to a Christmas party. I got a story about a Christmas somewhere. So.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do. Quite a few of them in there, actually.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Yeah. I know one time I had to help my brother out a little bit because he didn't know where he was born when he had to get his birth certificate for his new driver's license, and he went to the wrong town.
Oh, sure.
Of course, all his life he grew up in that town, so he didn't realize he was born in another town.
Yeah, sure.
So it was like, new to him. He says, "Well, how did I know?" And I said, "Well, that's what it's all about." So
That's also why you have family members to tell you those things. Because when you're being born, you have no idea. You don't remember any of that stuff. Even 5 years later, let alone 50. So
well, that's true. That's true. But yeah, it came natural. Even in the military, I would talk about my family life to the guys. We'd be sitting there and just talking about, the California kids were always talking about surfing. The Midwest guys were always talking about the farm girls, and I was always talking about the girls on the East Coast. So
it sounds like the song California Girls, the way you're telling that. Well, East Coast girls are hip. Really.
And they were pretty hip. Yeah. They may not have been, Southern California girls, but, they were East Coast girls.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I guess it's fair to say then that your storytelling is actually more like anecdote telling. You like to tell anecdotes.
Yeah, lots of them. That's one of the things I learned in junior high to keep me there. So.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of anecdotes. I had an English teacher that loved to hear anecdotes, and that was the 7th grade, and that's what we wrote a lot of. Anecdotes. So
right.
And I do that even today. I belong to a veterans writers club.
Oh, nice.
And they'll throw out something, and we have to write it. And I always write something from the past that reminds me of it.
Sure.
And that's what I do. And he finally had to change it, so we went to get pictures, and he says, "Write something about this picture." So I write something. Something about the past.
Off of the past.
Yeah. So off I go writing stuff about the past again.
You found something in the picture to write about the past anyway.
I absolutely did.
All right. Yeah. Why not?
Well, like you said earlier, you write what you know.
Yeah. When you've got your métier, you stick with it. You know what works. So why would you want to change what works? That's really what it comes down to, right? So
it is. And then that's all I know is the past. I don't know the present. So
and the future is unknown. Well, I guess that's what fiction is all about, because we get to invent the future when we're writing fiction.
Yeah, but I would like to learn more about fiction. But there is a little fiction. But everything that I write is based on something of my past with fiction added into it.
I actually wrote a book about, let's see, when was it? About 12, 14 years ago, something like that. At the time of the financial crisis. It was set in the financial crisis. And it was almost all fictional. Almost none of it was drawn from my personal life experience directly. So I got to really kind of swim around in the experience of what's it like to just make up a story out of whole cloth. And one of the things that I found during that process is it kind of ties back to something Anne Marie asked about a few moments ago. She asked, I don't remember exactly how she said it, but she was asking about what was coming out of your experience, and you went right into well, it's totally out of my experience. It's always out of my my personal background and the military and all that kind of thing. Your experience growing up in Abington, But when you don't have anything coming out of your experience directly, which is what I was trying to do out of whole cloth like that, you end up with the same kind of flow. She asked about that flow, right? And you said you get into that flow. Well, the same thing happens when you are writing just pure fiction. The harder part is that it takes a while to get there. Because like with the method you're using, you have all these anecdotes to draw upon. So you can just pick one and you can start writing off of that. And I'm sure the flow becomes pretty easy for you.
It
But
does.
when you're trying to write something out of whole cloth that's just, a complete invention, it takes a while to get that cloth going in your mind. But once you get it going, the same kind of thing happens. The flow just kicks in. I remember when I wrote my novel, I think I took something like 3 months to write it, but I swear that about half of it got written in 3 days. Because all of a sudden, I mean, the whole thing came together in my mind. I knew what the whole story was, and I had to get it out fast before I forgot any of the details.
Wow. Well, there's a problem there. I have that problem as well. I have to get it out fast or I'm going to forget.
Right.
And I don't know when it's going to come back. So, but yeah.
So you get it out while you can.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know exactly what that's like. In fact, when I wrote my novel, it was just at the point where we were in the very earliest stages of being able to dictate into a microphone to a computer. The software was nowhere near where it is today, but you could do that to a slight degree. And I can't say I really wrote the book that way because the software wasn't good enough to write it that way. But I dictated a whole lot of the book, and then I did a whole lot of fixing because it was the only way I could get it out fast. I'm a fast typist, but I couldn't speak fast enough, let alone type it. So I had to just speak and record it, and then try to get the machine to translate it into text, which wasn't so good at back then, not like it is today. But that was my only way to be able to get it out. That was to get it out as fast as I could onto an audio recording so that I could hear it and say, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Oh yeah. And then the next, oh yeah, now I remember what happens. Because when you're in the middle of creating it, there's not a recorder plugged into your ear saying, okay, this is what happens next.
I wish it were that easy.
Right?
Now, sometimes I'd go along and I'd read that story and I said, well, that needs to be moved back a little bit.
Yeah, right.
How'd that get in there? I don't know. It just did. So, but yeah.
Well, that's why it works the way you were describing earlier. You talked about how you just want to get it out, get it down on paper. Just, it didn't matter how good it was or anything, just get it out, which is like the first rule you learn when you're writing a large piece like that. Just get it out. It doesn't have to look like anything, doesn't have to be a good story. No. You just have to get it out. Right, Anne-Marie? I mean,
absolutely.
It's just like almost like regurgitating. Just spit it out there. Get it out in the paper. Get it onto the machine.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I because the book that I wrote is children's one. So I went into the characters. I drew pictures. I just little things that came into my brain that were like an enchanted forest kind of things that I could come up with. And then it came and then it just flew. And like you say, it was probably a good couple of thousand words extra to what it is now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you talk about pictures, that was the hardest thing for me to learn is to write a picture, draw the picture so that when the reader reads it, they can visualize it. And you're looking at somebody, like I said, that wrote processes and the employees didn't want to visualize it. They just wanted to know that this screw, washer, and bolt all went together. Right. And where did it go together? In A, B, and C. Right. And you just can't do that when you're telling the story.
Not really, no. Not unless you want to put everybody to sleep. And then that would work real well. But
yeah. Then the book sits on the shelf for the rest of its life.
Right, yes.
It doesn't get a recommendation.
But it sounds like we get to know your character from the early years onwards. And it sounds like a beautiful setting where you're from. So even as you were saying it, I was getting a picture of it.
I wanted everybody to paint the picture. Like I said, I wasn't the sharpest knife in the tool shed, and I worked my way up to it, and I had a lot of help. I had a lot of good people behind me that straightened out my life before I got to be an adult as well. And she was one of them that helped me straighten out, but she couldn't correct some of my problems. And that caused us to have a breakup for a while, because I had to learn that I had to control some jealousy factors in my head. So, which was the hardest thing, you know, for me, and I can't say it for every boy back then, but then again, it must have been because I can sure remember an awful lot of fistfights growing up.
Okay.
So, over a girl, and I couldn't understand why. So,
Yeah.
but that was just part of the juvenile life of us back then. But it was so. It is a book is a complete love story. So you don't have to worry about reading any of the fist fights.
Oh, okay. So not quite so violent. That's good.
No, I lived 4 years in violent. That was good enough for me. Once I left, I was done. So, but I wanted, like I said, this is pure. I wanted to pay a dedication to her, more or less. I wanted to make that part of it. I wanted her to know, where I came from back then, but why the things were the way they were then. So hopefully I did a good job of that, and hopefully maybe someday she'll walk past and see the name on the book and say, I wonder if that's the same guy I dated.
Never know. That could happen.
Yeah. So, and then again, it could be a book burning. Who knows? So
actually, either one of those is a good indication that the book has popularity, because a book doesn't get burned if it's not popular. And at the same time, it doesn't end up on a shelf if it doesn't have a degree of popularity. So, on a bookshelf in a store window. So either way, you've achieved some level of popularity in order to get there.
I may have achieved something I didn't even try.
That's right.
Oh, nice.
You also mentioned something else that kind of sticks out to me. We're talking about how you had things to learn when you were at that age, and it occurs to me that that's actually true of anybody who comes onto the program. The typical storyline of someone who's a guest on the program is someone who, at some point in their life, things were going well, and then they had a crash and burn. Some kind of traumatic event happened, maybe a series of traumatic events. Some were extremely traumatic for some people. But almost to a man, to a woman, everyone who's come out of the program has come through at the other end and grew as a result of it in one way or another, and wanted to share their growth story and some of the knowledge they picked up with others, because they realized, wow, I picked up some really important stuff here. Other people need to know this too. So that kind of a theme plays out not just in the world of fiction, it plays out in the real world as well. We're constantly in growth mode. And I think that's one of the key elements of what makes a story interesting. Probably the worst kinds of stories, I'll go to movies next. The worst kinds of movies are the ones where nobody grows. All the characters are static. Nothing ever changes. It's the Stepford Wives forever. It's just, oh my God, it's all the same.
The women
Those are the movies that flop. They're terrible, and we all know them. We all recognize them. We all try to stay away from them. Whereas the stories where the persons grow, where things change, they face challenges, they have defeats, and they have occasional victories followed by more defeats and more victories, and then all this kind of crazy tapestry stuff happens. Those are the stories we love, because those are the ones that represent the growth that we all experience.
Yeah, you had to have growth. I didn't realize that. My editor said, where did the growth come in? And she said, you have to write about that. And so I had to go back and really think, when did I make those changes? Where was the growth in that book? And it boiled down to, she is the one that made me realize I had to do the growing up. She was grown up, and all she knew what she was doing, and she was asking all the right questions. I just didn't have the right answers. So, and I had to learn to grow, and she was good about that. But then again, we move on because, I wasn't growing, I guess, the way that she wanted her person in her life. So, we had to say goodbye for a short period of time. And, between her and the Air Force, I had to do a lot of growing up. So when I came back, I thought I was a grown up. So, but I still had to grow. I didn't finish growing. So,
well, one of the smartest people I've ever met once pointed out to me that if you're still pumping air in and out, you haven't stopped growing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, it kind
Yeah.
of makes sense. If you stop growing, you die. There's not a whole lot in
Yeah.
between. You
Well,
know?
see now, I've never gone down that road, but I will now. So you've just
And
given me another idea for a story.
exactly. And do we ever really grow up? I mean, we play
Good question.
adulting, but do
Yeah.
we ever really? I think we're
I
all
don't
kids
know.
at heart.
I think my grand nieces and nephews didn't think I grew up because I still like to, when I go to the amusement park, I'm game for almost anything. So, I still have that thrill, the excitement, in me to do that. And I don't hesitate. If, at this age, I shouldn't be roller skating, but I'll go roller skating.
Oh, screw shouldn't be. Who cares
You
about
know.
that? I mean,
Well, it's the fall I keep worrying about. So, if I'm good until the fall comes, and then I'm wondering how good am I going to be after. So, but I enjoy it. I still look forward to those doing the things I could have done when I was a teenager as well. I mean, I like that. I mean, yeah, we're all getting older, but I don't want to lose the youth in me either.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and actually, the fall isn't what hurts you anyway. It's the landing, but that's another story.
I was going with the embarrassment.
Yeah, well, that's good too. Yeah. All right. I'll go with that. It's just another way that we learn, right?
What did we say earlier? It's all about learning.
That's right.
Air in, air out. I'm learning still.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Actually, one of my, I've heard the same message from a number of different teachers and influencers and so forth over the years. One of my other favorite influencers said kind of the same concept, but they said it a little bit differently. They said, here's a test to find out whether or not your life, you have more to be done with your life project. If you're still alive, then you do. If you're not alive, then you don't. In other words, the project never ends. The journey never ends as long as you're living. And I would even argue after death too, but that's another story. We won't even get to that story just yet. But within this lifetime, if you're still breathing, if you're still alive, if you're still awake, your journey isn't done. You got more to do.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100% because it's, I look forward to every day that comes, because it's a new day and a new dawning. There's something new out there for me somewhere. And usually it's going to be another story from the past that came to me. So, or we were in a place and it reminded me of something from the past. So there's always something happening in the brain cells up there, being creative and saying, I should really write that down so I can put it in the next book and so on and so forth. So, which is what I found I love doing now. I thought working as an engineer was great, but this storytelling thing is even better. I even picked up the ukulele along the way. So
Did you really?
I did. One of the greatest things I always wanted to do was, be a rock and roll star. That didn't happen.
It can in your next book.
Well, it could be. I'll make myself a rock and roll star.
Yeah, why not? Sure.
But yeah, I loved music ever since I was a kid. It was in my genes. I did play music as a child. I learned in the 4th grade, picked up the trumpet, and went from there. In the military, didn't want to play the trumpet out there in Vietnam very much, so play a guitar. And a lot of people brought guitars over with them, so I learned from the best over there.
Sure.
They taught me some quick chords, and you could just make anything up along the way. It was great. So we played the guitar for a while, and then as I grew older, we found out that the strings on the ukulele were easier to press. So
right, yeah, they are.
So now we're down to the ukulele, and the good thing about it is most of the ukulele players are right in my age group.
Oh, okay.
And we have a great time just getting together. And as we say, they found out I wrote a book, and they want to hear the stories of the book. And sometimes I pop up and I tell them a quick story.
Yeah.
So, but I always love to tell the one about the cranberry bog. That is my favorite story. So,
No, no, I'm sorry. You can't just leave that hanging there.
No.
You're not allowed to do that. Sorry.
What? You can't buy the book and read it for me?
You got to at least give us something more than that teaser. There's got to be a little bit more. I mean, even a trailer, a movie trailer gives you more than that. Come on.
Well, back in our days, there was a man that owned a very large cranberry bog, and he thought he was being progressive and bought out an old railroad company out of Maine. And he brought the trains and the tracks down to his bogs, and he used it for the way to transport his cranberries back to the facility, and how to tote the sand out to the cranberry bogs when they had to put it in.
Mhm.
So he laid 5.5 miles of track around his property.
Wow.
And it was a working train. But the kids growing up always went over and asked him, gee, can we ride your train? So he started giving rides on a train. He'd hook up some cars and put the kids on them, and off they go, And then all of a sudden word got around that, there's a cranberry train down there.
Okay.
And he started doing it just in the Christmas season. And then he put out lights throughout the cranberry bogs. And then you would go take a ride on the train around the cranberry bogs. And people loved that. And by the time I was of age to go there, it had grown into a full-size train museum. The train ride was well known to take out there. A lot of teenage couples went on those train rides.
Mhm.
So, and it was just a place that I thought one day I'm going to come back here with the girl I love. And I did. I went back
Nice.
with the girl I loved, and we went on that train ride, and I described everything that happened during that train ride. So
Fantastic. That's really cool. It's interesting how often, and there's a great example of how stories can kind of weave around. And this is going to be just as true for a fictional story as for a real story, but also for how most people's life stories go. That gentleman started off trying to solve a way to basically get the cranberries to market. And he said, I know, I'll come up with this creative way using a train. Did that turn into his main thing? No, his main thing turned out to be giving rides on a train through a cranberry bog, which was like the last thing he had in mind. But that's the way it tends to work out in life. We think we're creating this, but what we're really creating is that over there. And that's not what I had in mind. It's kind of cool, but not really what I had in mind. But this is interesting how this worked out. That's how storytelling usually works in the real world.
Yeah. It was fascinating to learn about him and doing it. And the name of the place is actually his name, his initials, EDA, and then Ville. So all he did was take his first three initials and add Ville to it, and it became Edaville.
Okay.
And that's the name of the place, Edaville Railroad. And that's where we went.
That's really interesting. Just out of curiosity, is Edaville Railroad still around?
Yes, it is. And I've contacted them about the book.
No kidding. Wow.
I said, there's a love affair in your facility. And I said, it's in my book. And so hopefully they read the book and they'll come back to me on it, because I would love to go to Edaville and do it, a book signing there, because the cover also shows the entrance sign to Edaville. So it's in the back.
Very nice.
Very well done by the people that published the book for me.
Mhm.
And it was great. It's more than I expected. So
Can't ask for more than that. That's cool.
yeah.
Anne Marie, you were describing earlier a little bit about your own experience when you were writing your children's book. Have you ever thought about doing the kind of thing that Robert does, where he reaches into his past and he tells all these anecdotes and turns them into stories? Have you ever thought about doing anything like that?
I never remember any of my stories. Life goes by so quickly. And yes, but there's something about listening to Robert and his stories, and it's just going back to I know, like you've mentioned the Vietnam War, but it's something like the romance of it and the historical of it and the nostalgia. And, everything's kind of like computerized nowadays, and there's new rules and stuff. And it just feels like that's just proper old school romance. And that's something that I just think can get lost sometimes.
I think you're right. It got lost as generations came about. I think you're right that um, there was a romance in the air back then for some reason. I don't know what it was. I know it wasn't my '57 Buick, um, but there was a romance back then that we all had. Maybe it was because of the generation before us, because it seemed like you went to school with people and you ended up being with that person that you went to school with or that you worked with in the local markets in the area, because we definitely didn't have these large markets as we have today, and you know the big places that people go to. We had local homeowners that own these department stores and supermarkets and things like that. They were our neighbors, our friends, and the people who helped us grow along the way. So, but I don't see that in today's society as much, so I wanted to make sure that my family knew about that, what life was like growing up back then. I always wanted to know what life was like for my parents, but they were too shy to tell me, I guess. So, but I'm not shy. No, I'm sorry to say.
I'm not sorry.
No.
I'm very glad that you're not shy. I think that's a good thing. Because, like you say, not just parents, but generations tend to not tell their stories to the generations that follow.
Yeah.
And so much gets lost as a result of that.
I believe.
Go ahead.
No, I just agree, and I agree with you. A lot of things get lost. As I said, if it wasn't for the genealogy and thinking there, well, why this and why that? How did he get here and how did they get there? And it was like, well, I don't want to do that to my family. I want to know. I want them to know about my life growing up, where I've been, what was it like, including, going to Vietnam. I've written on that as well. I want them to know what those 4 years were like. So, what you experienced. I want them to know the experience so that they can sit back and hopefully they'll never have to experience anything like that.
Right, sure. But even more importantly, it creates a three-dimensionality to it. I mean, when you do genealogical work, now I'm not a genealogist, but my dad did family genealogy, and I've seen what other people have done. A lot of it is just what you can find in the records. So it's going to be birth dates, death dates, marriage dates, all that kind of thing. When you can find something that fills out the story, it becomes much more potent. So, for instance, in my own family, my father wrote about my paternal grandfather, in large part because my paternal grandfather died 14 years before I was born, so I never knew him. And he and my brother and my sister didn't know him either. So my dad wrote these stories about our grandfather and gave it to us as a Christmas gift. It was one of the most wonderful Christmas gifts. It is the most memorable Christmas gift I can. Well, maybe the second most. I can remember one other that would be up there, but it was one of the most memorable gifts I remember receiving at Christmas. I still retain it to this day, and it gave me something with my grandfather that I never would have had, a three-dimensional person.
Wow.
Without that, he would have just been a cipher. He would have been a birth date, a death date, and that's it. There would have been nothing else to him.
Yeah.
But now, because of this collection of stories that my dad wrote about my grandfather, I feel like I know the man that I never met.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful that you have that. Now I'll have to think about doing that, because I knew my great grandparents. That's how old I got. So I was lucky enough to even actually have a great grandfather to be able to talk to and ask questions. So I'm glad
I had that with a great grandmother. I had the same experience.
Yeah. And so and the girl in the book's the same way. That was the greatest Christmas present any guy could ask for. So I mean, I know she doesn't know it, but what she left was something that I didn't know was going to come out until I wrote the book.
Sure.
I didn't realize how much she really left in me after all those years. And there it is now out in, black and white. And, it's the all-time greatest romance in the world. So,
One of the topics that we've touched on a lot lately here on the show is artificial intelligence, particularly since in the last year and a half or so, the ability of a computer, an artificial intelligence computer, to basically create a new story out of thin air has really come a long way. And it leads a lot of people to fear. Writers are afraid, graphic designers are afraid. Lots of people are afraid that their careers are going to disappear because now computers can do these kinds of things. And I think they really missed the point.
Yeah.
Because one of the whole key points about storytelling is that when you learn to tell stories, not only are you able to tell stories that are individual to you, but they are about you as a human.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fiction is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but the fiction that it draws from real life actually makes more of an impact on people, particularly those people who are in some way related or close to the person that the story was about, or at least connected to that person, 2 or 3 degrees of separation. There's no way that a computer can ever replace that. That's not saying anything against computers. It's just that's not possible.
Yeah.
I mean, because the computer is not the human being who was involved in the family tree, was not involved in that set of activities.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely right on that. I don't think AI can take away everything. I think you still need the human touch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I can't see an AI generating a story.
I can show you some pretty cool stories. I won't talk down AI. AI does amazing things, but I think the biggest contribution that humans make going forward in their interaction with AI is the human ability to create. Because ultimately AI draws from large collections of human knowledge and takes the averages, so to speak, and then uses those averages to put stuff together. But in order to put stuff together, you have to have the data that creates the averages in the first place. And averages are not so interesting if it's all about what's right at the average point. It's much more interesting when you have the broad range of stuff to draw your average from. That's where you get all of the really cool data that you can start building stories from. So really, the best storytelling is the storytelling that's out on the edge. And that's something that computers are a long way from being able to do. Because that level of creativity, that's a level of creativity that requires a human consciousness as we understand it today. I don't see us getting to that. We may get there eventually. Don't get me wrong. I think artificial intelligence could eventually get there, but we're a long way from that.
Well, I look forward to it. That gives me something to go forward to now. So when I hit 90 and I'm starting to write again, I'll call up AI and say, you need to help me here, pal. So
I'm doing that. We're all going to start doing that. I'm telling you. Right. Anne-Marie and I were talking about AI last week's show. And after we were done, she made a comment to me. She sent me a note saying, "Oh, wow." She was like, she got her first, put her foot in the water, so to speak. Oh God. What was your experience like? Your first time when you played with it after we had our conversation?
Well, do you know what? It was wonderful because I did a meditation and I had this dream and it was a really vivid dream. And I was like, what does this mean? So I just went straight on to the thing and it came about with all these scenarios of what this dream could have been. And I was like, and I remembered what you said about, I went, oh, thank you, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day I went in to ask another question about that. It just popped into my head and it was like, hi, Anne-Marie, did you have any good dreams last night? And it's just like having a conversation with a new friend. It's just like, it was actually quite a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
And I got some great knowledge out of it. So I've been using it all week on and off. I've even got the kids using it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were like, what's this, Mummy? I'm like, why don't we just ask Pi?
Wow. Hey, now that's a twist, isn't it? Because it's usually the kids who are teaching the parents about the technology. Now we got the parent telling the kids about the technology.
I know, you made me a cool mum.
I guess so. Yeah. That is terrific.
It is. That is great. So.
Well, also what is great is having had the opportunity to hear some of the stories that you had to share with us, Robert. And so I want to thank you for coming onto the show and telling us about the book and telling us about some of your life experiences and so forth. And I guess there are two main questions I need to ask before we're done. The first one, I would imagine, well, I don't even dare say this. I'm going to just throw it out there. How does somebody find the book? I'm not even going to prejudge it. Somebody wants to find the book. First of all, tell them the title again and tell people how to find it.
Well, the book is Entangled Hearts, and it's a forbidden journey of love is the name of the book. So you got to be careful because there's another book out there named Entangled Hearts.
Oh,
So you
okay.
have to have that
You
forbidden
have to have the
journey of
subtitle.
love in there.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon. It's all at Barnes and Noble and all the major bookstores. And I'm just getting into the independent bookstores locally here in New York right now. So
Good.
I am going to be out doing some of the book tours. I'll be signing books at some of the smaller places, not the larger ones.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to get onto social media as well. Now, I do have my own website for the book out
Okay.
there, which is www.robertacrothers, all one word, .com.
Okay.
And
I'll make
on
sure we
that,
get that in the show notes too, so that it makes it easier for people to find that too.
they can find the book there, and soon they'll be able to order the book from that website as well.
Nice.
So, but other than that, it's out in 3 versions. It's soft cover, hardcover, and ebook now, all on Amazon.
Very good.
And
all right.
so
Okay.
that's where you can get the book now.
Sounds like it's going to be pretty much everywhere pretty soon, because this is a book that was just published. I mean, this came out in March, didn't it?
18th, March 18th.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it isn't even 2 months old yet.
No,
Mhm.
but it seems like a year.
It probably seems longer because of how long you've been working on it.
Yeah. Already the people that have seen it already want, okay, so what's the follow-up book to it?
So you got the sequel in mind. All right.
Yeah.
Is there going to
So
be a sequel? I mean, can you reveal
there
that?
will be. Yeah.
There will be.
There-
Okay.
And it's going to be Entangled Hearts, and it has to do with something. Oh, I can't remember the title. I'll be honest with you now. It escaped me. I had one of those brain missing things.
Well, that's all right. You have a lot of time before the book gets published. So this is a basic rule of thumb where books are concerned. You start with a working title, and by the time you publish it, it's a different title. So you're okay. You're fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to stay the same title.
You think
if
so?
I can remember it.
If you can remember it. It'll be Entangled Hearts, the Alzheimer's version. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I have to remember that one.
It's a new novel every 10 minutes. All right.
That's it. Oh yeah, look forward to it. Can't wait for that commercial.
The other thing that I want to do before we part company, I made this a progress. I'm sorry, I made this a practice for the last couple of years. Is you came onto the show today. You share all these stories with listeners that you've never met, never will meet, probably in many cases. And you're doing this with other podcasts and so forth. You mentioned getting into social media, so you're doing what so many people do when they get into this real big giving mode, and that's what you're in. You're in that giving mode. You're giving stories out. I mean, you're selling your book too. Don't get me wrong, but you are out there sharing stories with people because you know how much people appreciate stories.
Oh.
And it occurred to me that we don't give enough credit to people who are just sharing regardless of whether they're being compensated for it. So I like to say on behalf of those people that you've never met and never seen, never will meet, never will see, on their behalf, thank you for the stories that you're telling and you're sharing, because you're making a difference with them in this world.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I enjoyed it the whole time. So I'm a very giving person, evidently. So there's something else I just learned.
There you go. So Anne-Marie, tie it together for us. What's the biggest takeaway for you listening to Robert's story today? Or stories, I should say, anecdotes, all the series of stories.
Exactly. I think so that you base it. I mean, obviously, Robert's whole story and his book, it just sounds a wonderful story. And I love the fact that it's written and his family will get to experience that for us forever. And you asking the question about going on past experience for writing books. And I think it just reminds me of all the times I sit with my dad and he tells me stories of the family and he goes into the history and of everything. So I think for me, it's understanding your roots. Go and speak to your family, learn their stories, take that forward, because it's part of you.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's all part of you. And that's what I missed the most out of my family is when I did ask sometimes it was, you're better off not knowing about it, they say. And really, no, I'm not.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to leave that out. I want my family and I want the world to know, you know, if you can, relate to it, that's great, and it's something to relate to. I know it won't be for everybody, because nothing is, but if you have an interest of the past and what it was like, it's a great book to read then, because it deals with, teenagers and young adults, growing up and trying to become, aged with time as we, traverse through the 70s and the 80s and so forth, because every decade changes.
Oh, yeah.
And with it, I had to make changes, but what I didn't lose was the past, and I put it in the form of writing.
And that's a form of celebration.
Yeah.
That's really probably the best part about it. You celebrated your past by recording it.
Yeah. I want to celebrate it before everybody else does. I know you're probably going to have to wrap up, but I got to tell you this.
What's that?
I've always, we have friends and family people that pass on, and you go and they say the celebration of life and everything. I said, well, wouldn't it have been better if we told them at that time when they were with us?
Definitely.
Not tell the story now that they're not with us, saying, so I love telling these stories while you're with me.
Right.
Family's with me. Yeah. And those that aren't.
Sure.
Aren't my family. I want them to say, what a great life it must have been in the 60s or the early 70s and so on and so forth. So, tell them the stories. That's the way it is. And one of the things I look forward to is starting to go out to the nursing homes and things like that and telling them the same stories that we just talked about now.
Sure.
I want them to enjoy life as well. And that's it.
Ultimately, one of our favorite topics to talk about here on the show is appreciation, and that's what that is. That's a form of appreciation.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that I had the opportunity that I've had and was able to be born and have made it to this age in life. So now I'm going to share it, and I'll even bring my ukulele just to entertain them.
There you go. I love it. Comes with a soundtrack.
Yeah. Well, for every story I got a song. So
very
who
cool.
knows? I may be the newest troubadour yet. So
I think you already are.
So
because that's what a troubadour was. A troubadour was a storyteller who intertwined songs.
Yeah.
That's exactly what a troubadour did.
We're teaching everybody everything new now. So.
That's right. It all comes around.
That's right.
Robert, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for telling your stories. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
I thank you for having me today, and I appreciated being with you. It was an enjoyment.
It was enjoyment for us as well. By the way, I wanted to mention to you, when I was growing up, we had a 57 Buick. I just wanted to mention that.
Was it a Buick Special?
It was an Electra, but that's all right. It was close. Yeah.
Okay. We share something in common.
We certainly do. So thank you very much, Robert. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.